I knew buying the Marina property in Beaufort, South Carolina, was going to change my life, but I never imagined it would turn into a full-blown war with the most vindictive homeowners association president I had ever met. My name is Henry Olsen, and I am about to tell you how a simple property dispute escalated into something that would expose corruption, threaten lives, and eventually land several people in handcuffs. The Marina sat on 23 acres of prime waterfront property that I purchased 5 years ago with money I had saved from selling my construction business in Charleston. The property included a small boat storage facility, 12 slips, a bait shop, and most importantly, a quarter-mile private road that connected to the main highway. When I bought the place, the previous owner mentioned that the Palmetto Shores HOA occasionally used the road as a shortcut to reach some of their properties faster, but he said it was never a problem. For the first 4 years, everything was peaceful. I ran my marina. The HOA residents used my road occasionally, and nobody bothered anyone. Then Margaret Thornton became the HOA president, and everything went straight to hell. Margaret was 52 years old with blonde hair that was always styled like she was about to attend a country club luncheon, even at 8 in the morning. She drove a white Mercedes SUV and wore pearls like they were a mandatory uniform. The first time I met her was on a Tuesday morning in March when she pulled up to my Marina office in that gleaming Mercedes, her heels clicking on the wooden dock as she approached. "You must be Henry," she said without offering a handshake. "I'm Margaret Thornton, president of the Palmetto Shores Homeowners Association. We need to discuss your marina." I wiped my hands on my jeans and nodded. "What about it?" "Well, frankly, it's an eyesore," she said, gesturing around at my property like she was pointing out a landfill. "The Palmetto Shores community has certain standards, and your establishment is bringing down property values." I felt my jaw tighten. "Madam, my property is not part of your HOA. I checked all that before I bought it." "That may be technically true," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "but you still have a responsibility to the community. We're asking you to repaint your buildings, remove those rusted boat trailers, and perhaps consider a more upscale clientele." I laughed. I actually laughed right in her face. "Lady, I run a working marina. Fishermen use this place. Charter captains dock here. This is not some yacht club, and I am not changing a damn thing to please your HOA." Her smile disappeared like someone had flipped a switch. "I see. Well, Mr. Olsen, I hope you reconsider. For your own sake." She left, and I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from the Palmetto Shores HOA legal team. The letter claimed that my marina was operating without proper permits, and that I owed the HOA $14,000 in back fees for using community resources. I read the letter 3 times, each time getting angrier. I called my attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca Winters who had handled my property purchase. She reviewed the letter and immediately started laughing. "Henry, this is complete garbage," she said. "You have all your permits. The county, the state, and the Coast Guard all signed off on your operation, and you don't owe them a single penny because you are not part of their HOA. This is harassment. So what do I do? Ignore it. If they want to pursue this, let them take you to court. They'll lose, and they'll have to pay your legal fees." I followed her advice and sent a brief response through Rebecca stating that I would not be paying anything and that the marina was in full compliance with all actual regulations. I assumed that would settle things. Margaret Thornton did not like being told no. The following month, I started receiving violation notices from the county. Someone had filed complaints about noise, pollution, improper waste disposal, and even allegations that I was operating a commercial fishing business without proper licensing. Every single complaint was filed by Margaret Thornton or other HOA board members. The county had to investigate each complaint, which meant inspectors showing up at my marina constantly. Every inspection came back clean because I ran a tight ship, but the harassment was taking up hours of my time and starting to cost me money and lost business. "She's trying to bury you in paperwork," Rebecca said during one of our increasingly frequent phone calls. "It's a common tactic. She figures if she makes running your business difficult enough, you'll either give in to her demands or sell the property." "I'm not selling," I said firmly. "This is my livelihood." Then we fight back, document everything. Every interaction, every complaint, every inspection. We're building a harassment case. Things escalated further in June when I found Margaret standing on my dock at 6 in the morning, taking photographs of my boats. "What the hell are you doing on my property?" I demanded, storming out of my office. "This is a public waterway," she said coolly, not even lowering her camera. "I have every right to be here. The waterway is public. My dock is private property and you're trespassing. I'll leave when I'm finished documenting violations." I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff's office. Margaret's confident expression finally cracked when I reported a trespasser. She left before the deputy arrived, but I filed a formal complaint anyway. The next week, I received the letter that changed everything. The Palmetto Shores HOA was claiming that my private road was actually an easement that belonged to the community. They argued that because previous property owners had allowed HOA residents to use the road, it had become a public right-of-way through prescriptive easement. Furthermore, they were demanding that I pay for maintenance of the road, which they calculated at $42,000 in back charges. If I did not pay within 30 days, they would file a lien against my marina property. I sat in Rebecca's office with the letter spread out on her desk between us. She was shaking her head slowly, her expression a mixture of disbelief and anger. "This is absolutely insane," she said. "They have no legal basis for this claim. Yes, you allowed them to use your road as a courtesy, but that does not create an easement. You have clear title to that road. It's on your deed, your survey, everything. So they're just making this up. They're gambling that you don't have the money or the will to fight them in court. Even though they'll lose, litigation is expensive and time-consuming. They're counting on you caving." "I'm not caving," I said, "but I am done being nice." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking? That road is my private property, right?" "Absolutely. Then I'm closing it. No more HOA residents using it as a shortcut. If they want to claim it's theirs, they can do it without actually using it." Rebecca was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That's within your rights. But Henry, you should know that road provides quick access to the main highway. If you close it, response times for emergency services to some of those HOA properties will increase significantly." "That's not my problem," I said. "They should have thought about that before they threatened my business." The next day, I had a contractor install a heavy-duty gate at the entrance to my private road with a clear sign: "Private road, no trespassing, property of Palmetto Marina." I also installed cameras to document anyone who tried to use the road without permission. The response was immediate and explosive. My phone started ringing within hours. The first call was from Margaret herself, her voice shaking with rage. "You cannot close that road," she shrieked. "That is our access route. It's my private property, Margaret. Your own legal letter says you think you have a claim to it, so prove it in court. Until then, stay off my road. This is unconscionable. What if there's an emergency? Your residents can use the public roads like everyone else. The main highway access is only 3 miles longer. 3 miles could mean life or death. Then maybe you shouldn't have threatened to take my property, I said, and hung up. The calls kept coming. Other HOA board members, residents, even people claiming to be concerned citizens. I ignored most of them. Rebecca advised me to keep the gate locked and not engage in arguments. For 2 weeks, things were quiet except for the angry letters that kept arriving at my Marina. Then came the incident that proved just how serious this situation had become. It was a Thursday evening in early July, around 8 o'clock. I was closing up the bait shop when I heard shouting from the direction of my gate. I walked over to find an ambulance stopped at the locked entrance, lights flashing. A paramedic was standing outside, frantically waving at me. "Sir, we need to get through," he shouted. "We have a cardiac emergency at 445 Shoreline Drive. This road cuts response time by at least 4 minutes. My stomach dropped. I knew the law said I had to allow emergency vehicle access to my property, but I also knew that 445 Shoreline Drive was not actually faster to reach via my road unless you were specifically trying to avoid the normal route. The address you're going to is actually faster via Highway 21, I said. "Who told you to come this way?" The paramedic looked confused. "Dispatch said the caller requested this route specifically, said it was the fastest way." I unlocked the gate and let them through, but something felt off. I called Rebecca immediately. "They're testing you," she said after I explained what happened. "Someone in that HOA is trying to create a situation where you're blamed for delaying emergency services. Did you let them through?" "Of course I did. I'm not going to let someone die to make a point." "Good. Document everything. Time, date, what was said. I guarantee Margaret is behind this." I checked with my contacts at the county emergency services the next day. The cardiac emergency had been real, but the patient lived on the far side of the HOA community, where my road provided no time advantage whatsoever. Someone had specifically requested the ambulance use my private road, forcing a confrontation. The following week, Margaret submitted a formal complaint to the county commission claiming that my gate was creating a public safety hazard. She presented petitions signed by 200 HOA residents, demanding that the county force me to keep the road open for emergency access. The county called a hearing for late July. Rebecca and I spent weeks preparing our defense, gathering documentation that proved my road was private property, and that closing it created no significant impact on emergency response times for the vast majority of HOA properties. The hearing was held in the county administration building on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon. The room was packed with Palmetto Shores residents, all wearing matching blue shirts that said, "Keep our community safe." Margaret sat in the front row, her expression radiating smug confidence. I presented my case through Rebecca, showing the property surveys, the deed, and documentation that my road had always been private. We demonstrated that the road only provided marginally faster access to 6 properties out of the 312 homes in the Palmetto Shores HOA. And even for those 6 properties, the time difference was less than 2 minutes. Margaret's attorney, a slick guy named Brandon Pierce, argued that community safety superseded property rights and that my petty dispute with the HOA was putting lives at risk. He showed photos of my Marina, making it look as run down as possible, and painted me as a stubborn businessman who cared more about money than people. The county commissioners asked questions for over an hour. Finally, the chairman, a retired engineer named Thomas Bridgewater, delivered their decision. "Mr. Olsen, while we understand the HOA's concerns, the law is clear. Your road is private property and you have the right to control access to it. However, we strongly encourage you to work with the community to reach a reasonable compromise, particularly regarding emergency vehicle access. Margaret's face turned red. This is outrageous. You're prioritizing one man's ego over an entire community. Madam, please sit down, Commissioner Bridgewater said firmly. The decision is made. However, Mr. Olsen, I want to be clear. If a genuine emergency occurs and you deny access in a way that results in harm, you could face serious legal consequences. I understand, I said. And for the record, I have never denied emergency vehicle access. I let that ambulance through immediately. Noted, Bridgewater said. This hearing is adjourned. Margaret stormed out of the room, her entourage of HOA supporters following behind like angry ducklings. I thought we had won, but Rebecca looked worried. What's wrong? I asked as we walked to our cars. She's not going to stop, Rebecca said. People like Margaret don't accept defeat. She'll escalate this. Rebecca was right. 2 days after the hearing, I arrived at my marina to find that someone had vandalized 3 of my boats. Slashed seats, broken windows, and spray paint across the hulls. The damage totaled nearly $15,000. My security cameras had been spray painted over the night before the vandalism, so I had no footage of the culprits. The sheriff's department took a report, but Deputy Martinez was blunt with me. Mr. Olsen, unless you have evidence pointing to specific individuals, there's not much we can do. Could be kids, could be someone with a grudge. You've been in the news lately with that HOA dispute. I knew it was Margaret or someone she had convinced to do her dirty work, but I had no proof. I upgraded my security system, installing cameras that were harder to reach and had backup recording to the cloud. I also hired a night security guard, a retired Marine named Frank Torres who was built like a refrigerator and happy to have the work. For a few weeks, nothing happened. My insurance covered most of the vandalism damage, and business was actually picking up because the local news coverage had brought attention to my marina. Fishermen and boaters who were fed up with pretentious yacht clubs started coming to my place specifically because they knew I had stood up to an HOA. Then Margaret found a new angle of attack. In mid-August, I received a notice from the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. Someone had filed a complaint claiming that my marina was discharging pollutants into the waterway. The complaint included photos that appeared to show oil sheens on the water near my docks and alleged that I was improperly disposing of bilge waste. The photos were fake or manipulated. I ran a clean operation and had documentation proving that all waste was properly handled through licensed disposal services. But the investigation still had to happen, and DHEC took environmental complaints very seriously. The inspector, a thorough woman named Dr. Patricia Hammond, spent an entire day at my marina. She tested water samples, reviewed all my disposal records, and inspected every boat in my facility. Mr. Olsen, I'm not finding any evidence of improper disposal or pollution, she said as she packed up her testing equipment. Your records are immaculate, and the water quality around your docks is actually better than average for marinas in this area. So I'm clear, you're clear. But I have to ask, do you have any idea who filed this complaint? I have a pretty good idea, I said. Let me guess, Margaret Thornton. Dr. Hammond's expression confirmed it. I can't officially say, but between you and me, I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know a harassment complaint when I see one. Document everything, Mr. Olsen. If this continues, there are legal remedies for filing false complaints. I added the DHEC investigation to the growing file Rebecca was building. We now had documentation of over 20 separate instances of harassment, false complaints, and interference with my business. We have enough to file a civil harassment suit, Rebecca told me during a meeting in late August. We can sue Margaret personally and the HOA as an organization. With this much documentation, you'd almost certainly win and could recover damages plus legal fees. How long would that take? A year, maybe 18 months to get to trial. Could be longer if they drag it out. I thought about it. A year of legal battles, more stress, more money, or I could try a different approach. What if we go public? I asked. Really public. Local news, social media, the whole thing. Show people exactly what this HOA is doing. Rebecca considered it. It's risky. Could backfire if they spin the narrative against you. But it might also put enough pressure on the HOA board that the other residents force Margaret out. I decided to do it. I contacted a reporter named Jessica Chen from the Beaufort Gazette who had covered the county hearing. She jumped at the chance to do a deeper story on the dispute. The article ran on the front page of the Sunday edition in early September. Jessica had done her homework, interviewing me, several neutral boat owners who used my marina, and even some Palmetto Shores residents who were fed up with Margaret's aggressive tactics. The headline read, "Local marina owner fights back against HOA harassment campaign." The story went viral on social media. Within days, it had been picked up by regional news outlets, then by a national website that specialized in HOA horror stories. My Marina Facebook page went from 300 followers to over 20,000 in a week. The attention brought unexpected allies. A lawyer from Columbia named Richard Stone contacted me and offered to take my harassment case pro bono because he specialized in fighting abusive HOAs. A local business group raised money to help cover my security costs. Even the mayor of Beaufort called to express support and assure me that the city valued my business. But the attention also made Margaret even more desperate and vindictive. On September 15th, around 2 in the morning, Frank Torres called me in a panic. "Henry, you need to get down here now. There's a fire." I made it to the marina in less than 10 minutes. Fire trucks were already there, their hoses dousing flames that were consuming my bait shop. The building was old wood construction, and it burned fast. By the time the fire was out, there was nothing left but charred timber and ash. The fire marshal's investigation took 3 days. Their conclusion was arson. Someone had broken a window in the back of the building, poured accelerant inside, and lit it. Frank had been doing his rounds on the other side of the property and didn't see anything until the flames were already visible. This time, my upgraded security cameras caught something. A figure in dark clothing and a hood had approached from the direction of the HOA community, moving through the tree line to avoid the main cameras. The footage was grainy and didn't show a face, but it proved the fire was deliberately set. The sheriff's department opened a criminal investigation. Deputy Martinez, who had seemed skeptical before, was now taking things very seriously. "Mr. Olsen, this is beyond vandalism now. This is felony arson. If you have any idea who might be responsible, now is the time to tell me. I've told you from the beginning that Margaret Thornton has been harassing me for months," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rage and exhaustion I felt. "This is just the latest escalation. Having a dispute with someone isn't evidence that they committed arson. Do you have anything concrete?" I didn't, and that was the problem. Margaret was too smart to do something like this herself. She had convinced someone else to do her dirty work, or maybe one of her supporters had taken it upon themselves to solve her problem. The insurance would eventually pay for rebuilding the bait shop, but I had lost inventory, records, and months of revenue. Worse, Some of my regular customers were getting nervous about keeping their boats at a marina that was apparently under attack. I was sitting in the ruins of my bait shop the next morning when a car pulled up that I didn't recognize. A woman in her 60s got out, looking around nervously. "Are you Henry Olsen?" she asked. "Yes, madam. Can I help you?" "My name is Dorothy Fletcher. I live in Palmetto Shores, and I need to talk to you about Margaret Thornton." We sat in my Marina office, and Dorothy explained that she had been on the HOA board until 3 months ago when she resigned because she couldn't stomach Margaret's tactics anymore. "Margaret is obsessed with your Marina," Dorothy said. "She sees it as a blight on the community, but honestly, I think it's more personal than that. You embarrassed her when you refused to bow down to her demands, and she can't handle it. At board meetings, she talks about you constantly. How you're ruining property values, how you're a danger to the community, how you need to be forced out." "You think she's behind the fire?" Dorothy hesitated. "I don't think Margaret would personally set fire to your building, but I know she's been talking to some of the younger residents, the ones who are very loyal to her. There's a man named Cody Patterson who does maintenance work in the community. I've heard him say some very aggressive things about you at HOA meetings, things like someone should teach you a lesson and make you understand you're not welcome here." I felt cold. "Did you tell the sheriff this?" "I'm going to. That's why I came to you first. I wanted you to know that not everyone in Palmetto Shores supports what Margaret is doing. A lot of us are horrified by how this has escalated. We've been trying to call for a vote to remove her as president, but she's blocked every attempt." Dorothy went straight to the sheriff's office after leaving my Marina. Based on her statement, deputies brought Cody Patterson in for questioning. They also executed a search warrant on his truck and found a gas can with residue that matched the accelerant used in the fire. His phone records showed he had been in text contact with Margaret Thornton multiple times on the night of the fire. Cody broke during interrogation. He admitted to setting the fire and said that Margaret had been encouraging him for weeks, telling him that my Marina was destroying the community and that someone needed to do something about it. He claimed he never meant for it to get out of hand and thought the fire would just scare me into leaving. Cody Patterson was arrested and charged with first-degree arson. The sheriff's department also arrested Margaret Thornton on charges of conspiracy to commit arson and solicitation to commit a felony. The news exploded across local and regional media. The woman who had been crusading about community safety and property values had convinced someone to commit arson against a local business. The hypocrisy was stunning, and the public backlash was immediate and brutal. The Palmetto Shores HOA held an emergency meeting the day after Margaret's arrest. By a vote of 287 to 12, she was removed as president and banned from holding any position in the HOA. The board issued a public apology to me and offered to pay for the repairs to my bait shop as a gesture of goodwill. I accepted their apology, but told them I would be pursuing the insurance claim for the repairs. I also made it clear that my gate was staying locked unless there was a genuine emergency that required my road for proper access. The new HOA president, a retired teacher named Bill Henderson, reached out to me personally. We met at a coffee shop in town, neutral ground. "Mr. Olsen, on behalf of the Palmetto Shores community, I want to apologize for everything Margaret put you through," he said. "What she did was unconscionable, and frankly, a lot of us are ashamed that we didn't stop her sooner." "I appreciate that," I said, "but I need to know that this is really over." "It is. We've dropped any and all claims regarding your road or your property. The board has voted to formally recognize that your road is private property and that we have no rights to it. We're also implementing new oversight procedures to prevent any single board member from having the kind of unchecked power Margaret had. What about the harassment complaints and all the county violations she filed? We've sent letters to every agency involved explaining that the complaints were filed maliciously and without merit. We've also offered to pay your legal fees for dealing with those complaints. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to stay angry to make them suffer the way they had made me suffer, but Bill seemed genuine, and I was tired of fighting. "I'll accept your apology," I said, "but I want something in writing, a formal agreement that the HOA will not interfere with my marina operations in any way. And I want assurance that if any HOA resident files a complaint against me in the future, it goes through a proper review process before being sent to authorities." "Done," Bill said. "I'll have our attorney draw up an agreement this week." We shook hands, and I felt the weight that had been sitting on my shoulders for months finally start to lift. Margaret Thornton's trial took place in March of the following year. The prosecution had overwhelming evidence, including text messages where Margaret had explicitly encouraged Cody Patterson to take action and make sure Henry understands he's not wanted here. The defense tried to argue that Margaret never specifically told Cody to commit arson, but the jury didn't buy it. Margaret was convicted of conspiracy to commit arson and solicitation to commit a felony. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 4. Cody Patterson, who had pleaded guilty and cooperated with prosecutors, received 8 years. During the sentencing hearing, I was allowed to give a victim impact statement. I stood at the podium and looked directly at Margaret, who sat at the defense table looking smaller and older than I remembered. "For months, you made my life hell," I said. "You filed false complaints, harassed me, vandalized my property, and eventually convinced someone to commit arson against my business. You did all of this because I refused to let you control me, because I had the audacity to own property near your precious HOA and not bow down to your demands. You claimed to care about community safety, but you were willing to burn down my building. You claimed to care about property values, but you committed felony crimes that brought shame to your entire community. I hope you spend your time in prison thinking about how your need for control destroyed your own life." Margaret didn't react, just stared straight ahead with an expression I couldn't read. The judge thanked me and dismissed me from the stand. After the trial, I focused on rebuilding. The insurance money came through, and I built a new bait shop that was bigger and better than the old one. I also expanded my dock space and added a small restaurant that served breakfast and lunch to fishermen and tourists. The relationship with Palmetto Shores HOA remained cordial but distant. I kept my gate locked, but I worked out an agreement with the county emergency services that I would provide them with a key code for genuine emergencies. In return, they agreed to only use my road when it provided a significant time advantage, not just as a general shortcut. Business boomed. The publicity from the dispute and trial had made my marina something of a local landmark. People came from all over the state to fish out of the place that had stood up to the HOA from hell. I hired 3 additional employees and bought 2 more boats to expand my charter operation. Frank Torres stayed on as my head of security, though thankfully his job became a lot less eventful after Margaret's arrest. He spent most of his shifts now just walking the grounds and chatting with late-night fishermen. One evening in late May, about 14 months after the fire, I was locking up my office when Bill Henderson pulled into the parking lot. I tensed instinctively, even though our relationship had been professional since he took over as HOA president. "Relax," Bill said with a smile as he got out of his car. "I'm not here on HOA business. I actually wanted to ask if you had any open slips. My son is moving to the area and needs a place to dock his boat. I laughed, feeling the last bit of tension drain away. Yeah, I've got space. Have him give me a call. Will do. And Henry, I know I've said this before, but thank you for not giving up on your business. A lot of people would have just sold out and left after everything Margaret put you through. The fact that you're still here and thriving means something. It means that bullies don't always win. They definitely don't, I agreed. After Bill left, I walked down to the end of my dock and watched the sun set over the water. The air smelled like salt and fish and possibility. I thought about everything that had happened over the past 2 years, all the stress and anger and fear. I thought about the threats, the harassment, the fire that had nearly destroyed everything I had built. But I also thought about the support I had received from the community, the customers who had stood by me, the legal team that had fought for my rights, and even the HOA residents like Dorothy Fletcher, who had found the courage to do the right thing. My marina was mine, free and clear, with no liens or claims or threats hanging over it. The private road that led to my property had a gate with my name on it, and that gate would stay locked except when I decided otherwise. I had stood up to an abusive HOA president and won, not just in court but in the way that really mattered. I had refused to be bullied off my own property. A fishing boat motored past my dock, the captain waving as he headed out for some evening fishing. I waved back, then walked back up to my office. Tomorrow I had 3 charters scheduled, a delivery of bait and tackle arriving at dawn and a restaurant supply order to place. Normal marina business. Exactly the way I liked it. The legal agreement with Palmetto Shores, HOA, hung framed on my office wall, right next to my business license and permits. I looked at it sometimes when I needed to remind myself that standing up for your rights, even when it's difficult and expensive and scary, is worth it in the end. Margaret Thornton was in prison. Cody Patterson was in prison. My marina was thriving. And my private road stayed private, with a locked gate and cameras and a security guard who actually knew what he was doing. I sat down at my desk and started going through the next day's charter bookings. The phone rang and I answered it with my standard greeting. Palmetto Marina, this is Henry. How can I help you? It was a tourist from Ohio asking about fishing charters. I booked him for a half-day trip, gave him directions to the marina, and hung up feeling satisfied. This was my life now. Running my business, serving my customers, and not taking garbage from anyone who thought they could push me around just because they had some petty authority in a homeowners association. The sun had fully set by the time I finished my paperwork and locked up for the night. Frank was starting his evening shift, walking the perimeter with a flashlight and a thermos of coffee. Everything was secure. Everything was as it should be. I drove home along that private road, my headlights cutting through the darkness. The gate closed behind me automatically, solid and secure. My property, my road, my rules, and absolutely no trespassing by vindictive HOA presidents allowed. The criminal case wrapped up with one final development in June. The district attorney's office contacted me to let me know that they had uncovered additional evidence during their investigation into Margaret's activities. Apparently, she had been embezzling money from the HOA for nearly 3 years, using her position as president to authorize payments to fake contractors and vendors, then pocketing the money. The total amount exceeded $120,000. The HOA board filed additional criminal charges, and Margaret pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence. She received an additional 4 years to be served consecutively with her arson conspiracy sentence, and she was ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. Dorothy Fletcher told me later that the embezzlement discovery had been the final nail in the coffin for Margaret's reputation. Even the few residents who had supported her aggressive tactics against my Marina couldn't defend outright theft from the community funds. "She destroyed herself," Dorothy said when we ran into each other at the grocery store, "all because she couldn't handle someone telling her no." The Palmetto Shores HOA underwent major reforms after the scandal. They implemented financial oversight procedures, term limits for board positions, and a new system for handling complaints that required verification before taking action. Bill Henderson told me they were actually using what happened with Margaret as a case study in HOA management courses. "You're famous in HOA reform circles," he said with a grin. "The Marina owner who stood up to corruption and won." I didn't particularly want to be famous for fighting an HOA, but I suppose there were worse things to be known for. And if my experience helped other property owners stand up for their rights, that was worthwhile. My attorney Rebecca Winters and I stayed in touch even after all the legal matters were resolved. She referred several other clients to me who were dealing with HOA disputes, and I was happy to share my experience and offer advice. The most important lesson I learned was to document everything and never back down when you're in the right. "You were the perfect client," Rebecca told me over drinks one evening. "You kept records, you stayed calm under pressure, and you trusted the legal process even when it was frustrating. A lot of people would have given up or done something stupid that would have hurt their case." "I came close a few times," I admitted. "When she burned down my bait shop, I wanted to drive over to her house and confront her, but you talked me down." "That's what lawyers are for," she said, "keeping our clients from making bad decisions in moments of anger." The restaurant I had added to the Marina became surprisingly popular. My chef, a guy named Marcus who had worked at high-end restaurants in Charleston before burning out on the fine dining scene, created a menu of seafood and southern classics that had people driving from hours away to eat at my dock. "This is what cooking should be," Marcus told me as he prepped for the lunch rush one day. "Good food, good people, and a view of the water. No pretentious nonsense, no demanding customers who send back dishes because the garnish is slightly off-center. Just honest food for honest folks." The success of the restaurant led to me hiring more staff and expanding my hours. I brought on a manager named Sarah Chen, Jessica the reporter's cousin, who had hospitality experience and a talent for organization that I definitely lacked. She took over the day-to-day operations of the restaurant and coordinated with my dock master for the Marina side of things. "You need to delegate more," Sarah told me after her first week. "You're trying to do everything yourself, and you're going to burn out. Trust your people to handle their responsibilities." She was right, of course. I had spent so long fighting to keep my Marina that I had fallen into the trap of thinking I had to control every detail. Learning to let go and trust my employees was surprisingly difficult, but it made my life much better. By the fall, 18 months after the fire, Palmetto Marina was employing 15 people and generating 3 times the revenue it had before the dispute with Margaret began. The publicity had been incredible for business, and my reputation as a straight shooting operator who ran an honest business had attracted customers who were tired of overpriced yacht clubs and pretentious marinas. I even got a visit from a television production company that wanted to do a reality show about marina life centered on my business. I turned them down immediately. "I've had enough public attention to last a lifetime," I told the producer. "I just want to run my Marina in peace." Frank thought I was crazy for turning down what could have been significant money, but I didn't care. The whole point of fighting Margaret was to protect my ability to run my business the way I wanted, without outside interference. A TV production would have been just a different kind of interference. The only concession I made to my newfound local fame was agreeing to speak at a property rights conference in Colombia. The organizers wanted me to talk about standing up to HOA overreach, and I figured it was worthwhile if it helped other people avoid what I had gone through. The conference was attended by about 300 property owners, attorneys, and activists who were working on HOA reform legislation. I told my story, showed documentation of the harassment, and explained how I had built a case that eventually led to criminal charges. The most important thing is to never let them intimidate you into giving up your rights, I said during the Q&A session. HOAs have legitimate purposes, but when they are run by people who abuse their power, you have to stand your ground. Document everything, get good legal help, and don't back down just because fighting back is expensive or time-consuming. A woman in the audience raised her hand. Weren't you afraid? I mean, they burned down your building. What if they had escalated further? Of course I was afraid, I said honestly. There were nights I couldn't sleep because I was worried about what Margaret might do next, but fear can't be what drives your decisions. If I had let fear make me give up, Margaret would have won. She would have taken my property or forced me to sell, and she would have moved on to bullying the next person who stood up to her. Sometimes you have to be afraid and do the right thing anyway. The response to my speech was overwhelming. I had dozens of people come up afterward to thank me for sharing my story or to ask for advice on their own HOA disputes. I exchanged contact information with several of them and promised to help however I could. One man, a retired engineer named Walter, told me his story about an HOA that was trying to force him to remove solar panels from his roof because they violated the aesthetic guidelines of the community. He had the panels installed before the guidelines were updated, but the HOA was claiming they could enforce the new rules retroactively. Don't let them, I advised. Your panels were legal when you installed them. They can't just change the rules and force you to comply retroactively. Get a property rights attorney and fight it. Walter thanked me and said he had been on the fence about whether fighting was worth it, but hearing my story had convinced him to stand his ground. On the drive back to Beaufort after the conference, I thought about how strange it was that standing up for my Marina had turned into something bigger. I wasn't an activist or a reformer. I was just a guy who wanted to run his business in peace. But sometimes that's all it takes to make a difference. Someone willing to say no to bullies and follow through, even when it's hard. Back at the Marina, life continued to improve. I finally paid off the loans I had taken out to upgrade security and rebuild after the fire. The insurance money had covered most of it, but there were still gaps, and being debt-free felt incredible. I also started dating someone, a marine biologist named Dr. Kate Sullivan, who worked at the University of South Carolina Beaufort campus. We met when she came to the Marina to collect water samples for a research project on coastal ecosystems. She was smart, funny, and thankfully had zero interest in homeowners associations. I grew up in an HOA neighborhood, she told me on our third date. My parents spent half their time fighting over whether they could paint the front door navy blue or if it had to be the approved shade of colonial blue. It was insane. I swore I would never live somewhere with an HOA. That's the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me, I joked, and she laughed. Kate became a regular presence at the Marina, sometimes helping out with tours for school groups or collecting samples for her research. The customers loved her, especially when she would explain the marine life around the docks or identify fish that people caught. By the time the second anniversary of the fire rolled around in September, Palmetto Marina was almost unrecognizable from the struggling business it had been before the dispute with Margaret. I had expanded the dock space again, added a ship store that sold marine supplies and local crafts, and was in the process of buying 2 adjacent acres to create a small boat launch area. I held a community event to mark the anniversary, inviting everyone who had supported me during the difficult times. Rebecca came, along with Dorothy Fletcher, Bill Henderson, and dozens of customers and local business owners. Even Deputy Martinez showed up, off-duty and looking relaxed in civilian clothes. "I'm glad everything worked out for you," the deputy told me as we watched kids fishing off the dock. "Cases like yours remind me why I became a cop. It's satisfying when justice actually works the way it's supposed to." Frank organized a barbecue, Marcus made special dishes for the event, and Sarah coordinated everything with her usual efficiency. Kate helped with a touch tank where kids could see and touch marine life under supervision. It was perfect. As the sun set and people started heading home, I stood at the end of my dock again, like I had so many times over the past 2 years. The water reflected orange and pink from the sunset, and boats bobbed gently in their slips. My marina, my property, my success. Bill Henderson came over to say goodbye before he left. "You know, Henry, when this whole thing started, a lot of people in Palmetto Shores thought you were just being stubborn. They didn't understand why you wouldn't compromise with Margaret." "And now?" I asked. "Now they understand that some things aren't worth compromising on. Margaret didn't want compromise anyway. She wanted complete control, and she was willing to destroy anyone who got in her way. You exposed that, and honestly, you probably saved our community from years more of her corruption and abuse." "I just wanted to run my marina," I said simply. "I know. But sometimes doing the right thing for yourself ends up being the right thing for a lot of people." After everyone left, I walked through the marina one more time before heading home. Every building was locked up tight, all the boats were secure, and Frank was starting his night shift. Everything was as it should be. I drove home along my private road, past the gate that still bore my name and no trespassing signs. The road that had started this whole mess was now just a road again, a practical piece of infrastructure that got me from the highway to my marina without drama or conflict. My phone buzzed with a text from Kate asking how the event went. I sent back a photo of the sunset over the marina and a simple message: "Perfect," because it was perfect. Not because everything had been easy or because I hadn't faced serious challenges, but because I had fought for what was mine and won. Because I had stood up to someone who thought they could bully me into submission and proved them wrong. Because my marina was thriving, my employees were happy, my customers were loyal, and my private property remained exactly that: private. Margaret Thornton was serving her prison sentence in a facility about 200 miles away. I never thought about her unless someone specifically brought up the case. She had taken up enough of my time and energy during the dispute. I wasn't going to give her any more now that it was over. The HOA drama had taught me valuable lessons about standing up for yourself, the importance of documentation, and the reality that some people will abuse any authority they're given. But it had also shown me that communities could be supportive, that the legal system could work when you had right on your side, and that perseverance paid off. I settled into my routine of running the marina, spending time with Kate, and occasionally helping other property owners who were dealing with HOA disputes. Life was good, busy, and blessedly free of threats, harassment, or arson. The locked gate at the entrance to my private road stayed locked, except for emergencies. The agreement I had with the county emergency services worked well. In the 2 years since implementing it, Ambulances had used my road exactly 4 times, all for legitimate emergencies where the time savings were significant. Each time I was notified, and each time I had no problem with them using the road. That was the difference. When people respected my property rights and asked rather than demanded, I was happy to help. When they tried to bully or threaten me, they got a locked gate and a legal fight. As I think back on everything that happened, I realize that the whole dispute could have been avoided if Margaret had simply approached me respectfully from the beginning. If she had said, "Henry, some of our residents use your road occasionally, and we'd like to establish a formal agreement to continue that access, including helping with maintenance costs," we probably could have worked something out. But Margaret didn't want an agreement. She wanted control. She wanted to dictate terms and have me bow down to her authority. When I refused, she escalated rather than compromise, ultimately destroying her own life in the process. I don't feel sorry for her. She made her choices, and she had multiple opportunities to back down before things got criminal. Instead, she chose to keep pushing, to keep harassing, and eventually to conspire to burn down my building. Those were her decisions, and she's facing the consequences. What I do feel is grateful. Grateful for the people who supported me. Grateful for the legal system that protected my rights. And grateful that I had the resources and stubbornness to fight back. Not everyone in my situation would have been able to do what I did. And that's something I think about when people reach out for advice about their own HOA disputes. The last major development in the saga came about 3 years after it all started. The state legislature passed new laws regulating HOA powers in South Carolina, including provisions that made it harder for HOAs to file liens without proper legal basis, and created penalties for board members who filed false complaints or abused their authority. Several legislators specifically cited my case as an example of why the reforms were needed. I was invited to Columbia for the bill signing ceremony. The governor, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Reynolds, shook my hand and thanked me for bringing attention to HOA abuse issues. "Your willingness to fight back probably helped a lot of people who don't even know it yet," she said. "These reforms will prevent situations like yours from happening to others." It was surreal, standing in the state capitol while the governor signed legislation that was partly inspired by my dispute with Margaret Thornton. I had never set out to become any kind of advocate or reformer. I just wanted to run my marina. But I suppose that's how change often happens. Ordinary people standing up to unfairness and refusing to back down. The news coverage of the bill signing brought another wave of attention to my marina. More customers, more interview requests, more people wanting to hear my story. I did a few interviews, but mostly tried to keep my head down and focus on my business. The marina continued to thrive. I hired more employees, expanded services, and built a solid reputation as one of the best operations on the South Carolina coast. The restaurant won several local awards, the charter fishing business was booked months in advance, and the boat slips had a waiting list. Kate and I got engaged that winter. I proposed on the dock at sunset, because where else would I do it? She said yes before I even finished asking, and we celebrated at the restaurant with champagne and fresh oysters. "I can't believe I'm marrying someone who went to war with an HOA and won," she joked. "My parents are going to be so impressed." "Tell them the gate stays locked," I said, and she laughed. We got married the following spring in a ceremony at the marina, because again, where else would we do it? Frank served as my best man. Rebecca was one of Kate's bridesmaids, and Bill Henderson attended as a guest. It was a small wedding, just close friends and family, exactly what we both wanted. Standing on the dock in front of everyone I cared about, saying vows to the woman I loved, I thought about how strange life's journey can be. 3 years earlier, I was fighting for my business's survival against a vindictive HOA president. Now I was getting married at that same business, which was more successful than I had ever imagined. The fights we face shape us in unexpected ways. Standing up to Margaret had forced me to become more organized, more determined, and more confident in asserting my rights. It had connected me with people like Rebecca, Dorothy, and Bill who became genuine friends. It had even, indirectly, led to meeting Kate, who came to the Marina because she heard about the property rights dispute and wanted to support local businesses that stood up to bullies. As Kate and I danced at our reception while the sun set over the water, I looked around at everything I had built and protected. The marina, the restaurant, the docks, the boats, and most importantly, the community of people who made it all worthwhile. My private road led here to this place, to this life, and the gate would stay locked except when I decided otherwise, protecting everything I had fought so hard to preserve. That was the end of the HOA saga, but it was also a beginning. A beginning of a successful business, a happy marriage, and a life lived on my own terms, answering to no one except myself and the people I chose to let into my world, and Margaret Thornton. She remained exactly where she deserved to be, behind bars with years left on her sentence. Her name became synonymous in South Carolina with HOA abuse and corruption. The reforms passed partly because of her actions would help protect property owners for years to come. Justice had been served, both legally and practically. The bully had lost, the victim had won, and life moved forward exactly as it should. I never did allow the Palmetto Shores HOA to use my road again, except for those genuine emergencies. That gate stayed locked as a permanent reminder that property rights matter, that bullies can be beaten, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to back down when you're in the right. The Marina thrives to this day, a testament to perseverance, principle, and the simple truth that your property is your property, and no HOA president, no matter how vindictive or powerful they think they are, can take that away from you if you're willing to fight for it.